What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second and final album by N.W.A. Basically, this album is called Niggas for Life, and it came out in the spring of 1991. So this is kind of the sequel to Straight Outta Compton. This is the follow-up album that took a couple extra years to come out. They did put out an EP in late 1990, which I reviewed a few months ago, called 100 Miles and Runnin'. And that one kind of had like a diss song towards Ice Cube, who had left the group in 1989. So Ice Cube was not on two out of three of the remaining N.W.A. projects, but this album really boils down to this. I'm not sure if like DJ Yell is kind of on here, but he was just more of a producer, and Arabian Prince isn't on there. So really, the only members on this album are just MC Ren, Dr. Dre, and Eazy-E. The thing about this album that I kind of have is like a decent complaint about it. Like I am going to give this album a higher score than Straight Outta Compton because it's just more. I am going to give this album a higher score than Straight Outta Compton because it's just better produced and has more effectual kind of songs. But the patchiness of this project, just in terms of the artists and musicians as they appear on songs, is just kind of dicier. Like at least on Straight Outta Compton, on songs like Gangsta Gangsta, Straight Outta Compton, and like Express Yourself and some of those type tunes, you would get the artists on there that kind of fit more effectualness. But they really seem to have like a pretty heavy emphasis on MC Ren on this project, and also on top of that, Eazy-E is a lot more elusive on this album. So Dr. Dre is kind of middle of the road where you'll see him most of the time, but just not on every single song. But Eazy-E is kind of the one who you see the least on here, and MC Ren's the one that you see the most. And I don't have a huge problem with Dr. Dre and MC Ren being on these songs, just because they do have some good sets. But I do kind of feel like there's just some songs on this album that needed Eazy-E, and it kind of makes it where I still like the songs without Eazy-E on there. It kind of makes it somewhat patchy, just because it's not as much of an N.W.A. album. It's just kind of like just a hit song by MC Ren, or by MC Ren and Dr. Dre, or something like that. It's just kind of the concept. And in some cases, I used to think back in the day, several years ago, that like Dr. Dre, this was kind of like a mini approach to his solo debut, because basically just the very next year, Dr. Dre dropped like The Chronic, which had G-Funk type stylings like on this album. Now, this album is kind of an in-between mixture between like the leftover kind of stark kind of cityscaping type tunes of just the early fix of like the 80s Straight Outta Compton type fare, but it does have Dr. Dre and DJ Yella doing some more advanced and kind of more sample heavy productions that really were like an early bird set of like the stuff that Dr. Dre would do on The Chronic, which is pretty awesome. Like one song in particular, Always Into Something, really feels like a song that just was like a leftover from The Chronic from 1992. It's the same kind of vibe. It's definitely like a G. Always Into Something is definitely like a G-Funk classic, this classic California summer, sprawling California type tune, just to cruise out and go get like some burgers and that type of stuff, and just smoke a blunt to in a joint, and some of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. This easy kind of Cadillac music and some of that type fare, but there's just not a bunch of songs like that. That's another one of my complaints about this album, is just the fact that there needed to most assuredly be more songs like Always Into Something, but there just aren't any other summer sprawlers like that. I mean, there's summer songs on here, but not in the context of just like a lazy kind of summer heat kind of day. Most of this album kind of, the thing about this album that it does is it does turn up like some of the more gangstified type cuts on here. It definitely has like some stark kind of thrillers on here that really sound reminiscent of horrorcore. I want to say that Esham was kind of around this time. I'm not sure where the horrorcore influence really drew from, but there is like a couple licks of horrorcore that just kind of give it a more dark. There are a couple licks in here that give it a more dark and horrifying type feel towards it, just in terms of that concept. So I really didn't see that concept with Straight Outta Compton, but it definitely has like a more shrouded kind of edge about this particular project that Eazy-E seemed like he was getting ready to dabble in that if he had lived a few years longer. But this is kind of the concept. There's just kind of a bunch of stuff on here. It doesn't quite have as much of like a thorough California feel. I feel like this is gangsta rap, but it just kind of feels like a bridging of the gap between like 80s rap music like Public Enemy and Beastie Boys and like N.W.A. from Straight Outta Compton days, to more of like the G-Funk sound that would happen with Dr. Dre and The Chronic. And this is just kind of like the conduit in between those two moments. You just don't get enough to really showcase that with like Always Into Something, but there is like vibes that do kind of have some of that cosmetic pitch. It's just too bad that Eazy-E is not more on these songs because he still retains quite a bit of his star power. It's just kind of the concept about it. It's just definitely kind of the thing. And Dr. Dre really bursts onto the spotlight in this album just because really on Straight Outta Compton he just wasn't there that much. He was just more of like a producer like DJ Yella. But as this kind of thing, I mean, MC Ren delivers some good vocals. Him and the DOC both write most of the songs on here, so he has his lyricism that he continued to have like on Straight Outta Compton. But you know, there's just not. I mean, I feel like the extra valve of having Ice Cube on there was kind of sorely missed, but it's just because they got in beef and all that. So this is kind of the thing. But we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So we'll go ahead and talk about the single. So the first single is Always Into Something, and this is like a very sparkling kind of summer G-funk classic. I definitely feel like this is classic California. When you think of songs like California Love, you think of songs like California Love by Tupac and Dr. Dre, and you think of like Nothing But a G Thing by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. And when you think of like Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg, this is another highlight that just screams California. Just an easy kind of G-Funk classic, just a simmering day for out and about. It's just got a real good sample on there. It's just classic kind of California type sound. This is easily a song worth purchasing the album for. I mean, there are more hit songs, but this is definitely like the banner lead single that this album definitely needed. The only real weakness to this song I can really see about is just the fact that Eazy-E is not fucking on the song. That this was a huge disappointment. I mean, I know they were trying to showcase these other artists, but I kind of look after, I mean, Dr. Dre getting into the spotlight and him getting ready to be on his solo tip and that type of stuff. And MC Ren does a good job also, but Eazy-E needed to be on the song. It just was a perfect fit for him. It would have been real neat to have kind of seen him on here, but it just didn't happen. It's just kind of like a definite kind of damn kind of moment just because it needed to happen. But it is a highlight. It's just a classic California type tune. Easy kind of early 90s rap hit, and just one of the better songs out of early 90s from rap music. It's just that signature as far as that goes. Yeah, I used to think that the song was like a song off the Chronic. I used to think that was an early single from the Chronic, but it's N.W.A. It was mid. It was it was kind of conduit stage for Dr. Dre here. So the second single is Appetite for Destruction, and this is kind of one. Second single is Appetite for Destruction. This is just a glaring kind of night tune, definite late night session for some late riveting kind of smoke sessions, that type stuff, and late sessions and shindigs. Definitely kind of song for that sort of vibe. It's just very lively in that sort of pitch. I definitely like the concept behind it. This is a lot more of like a party song. I mean, this is kind of one where this one, Appetite for Destruction, is more of like a party song, where if Always Into Something is more of like a summer glaring type tune just to kind of kick back and just really relax in like the summer heat. Appetite for Destruction is more kind of a night kind of backyard kind of party, just some smoke sessions, just kind of stuff like that, just kind of more kicking it and just in like a more rowdy and kind of riveting, raucous kind of sense. It's definitely kind of a party starter for N.W.A. that they just didn't really have on Straight Outta Compton, so it's a good one for that. Definite fitting title to be called Appetite for Destruction, and Eazy-E is on this song, so it's a good one to kind of get all three of them on here just for like a rowdy kind of glaring party tune. Definitely just definite kind of like real hazy, glaring kind of beat on here. I just really like the concept behind that one. Just really kind of rickety too. The Days of Way Back is the third single, and apparently this only charted in the UK or something like that, but it is a nice one. Yeah, The Days of Way Back is the third single, and apparently this only charted in the UK. It's kind of like the typical fourth single that kind of happened with like Eazy-E and N.W.A.'s albums as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of like a late kind of afterthought as far as that kind of goes. But this song kind of gave me like lazy saloon-like vibes, definitely like a mellow kind of ruffler. It's just kind of a relaxed kind of slow beer sipping kind of day type tune. It really feels like a saloon type tune, just kind of lazy days and just kind of a effectual kind of afterthought. Eazy-E is not on this song either. This is another one that he's kind of not on, but this is really like a mellow kind of just ruffling kind of tune as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of simple one for just going to like a bar or something like that, just having a couple beers and just relaxing a bit. Maybe just a football kind of day, or just where it's not like a rowdy kind of football day, but just kind of a one of those in between sessions of just kicking back a bit with that sort of sense. It's kind of more reclining and just sleepy, kind of induced and drowsy. So it's just kind of a good one. Dr. Dre really sounds at home on some of these songs. Just kind of interesting, just because he was not on Straight Outta Compton that much. Just to kind of say it, this is the way that he kind of goes along with some of these. In a lot of cases, if you don't pay enough attention, you could probably think that some of these songs are just like the Chronic songs, just because they have kind of some of that G-funk and heavy sampling kind of vibe. I mean, this one's not as much G-funk. This one's just kind of more early, still kind of 80s, early 90s California type feel. But there are some other songs, and we'll get to some of those that kind of have mellow G-funk vibes. Yeah, so there's 13 songs on here if you count the prelude intro, minus the 5 interludes out of 18 songs. There's 13 songs. So I wound up liking 8.5. So I'll go ahead and list those 8.5 songs. So yeah, I wound up liking 8.5 out of 13. So those 8 songs plus the almost song would be Always Into Something, I'd Rather Fuck You, Niggas for Life, Real Niggas, Find 'em, Fuck 'em, Flee, She Swallowed It, The Days of Way Back, and Appetite for Destruction. And the song I'm on the fence about is One Less Bitch. So to talk about One Less Bitch, the reason why that's an almost song, the reason why One Less Bitch is an almost song is because I like the beat on this song, but it just kind of has like a pitch kind of sound on there that just is somewhat grating. It's this kind of more of an irritable kind of beat where I like it, but it's just kind of an early step in like the G-Funk kind of vibes that was going to happen just a year later and that type of stuff. It's just kind of more of like a shot in the dark and kind of more of like patching things together, laying the foundation kind of vibe. It definitely reminds me of something that Cypress Hill would do in that sort of pitch, or Kid Frost, or some of those types. It's really good for Dr. Dre to kind of capture that sound of just being out in Los Angeles and Inglewood and some of those type places, just different places, San Francisco, even just part of the West Coast and those type vibes. But I just feel like the beat was just a little bit grating. It's just kind of the concept, just somewhat of an irritable kind of song. This definitely feels like an irritable kind of summer heat kind of day, like June, July, something like that, just kind of in that pitch. It is kind of a lady song. It just kind of has the concept of it, but it's kind of a lady song with the twist. It's kind of a shifty kind of woman as far as that kind of goes. But it's just kind of the concept about it. It is a good highlight, but it's just kind of one I'm on the fence about just because the beat just takes some more getting used to. But there are some ones on here that are some more hits. Like another hit on here was Real Niggas, which happens to be another hit off here happens to be Real Niggas, which was a song off of the 100 Miles and Running EP. This is just kind of a leery kind of evening cityscaping kind of tune. It's very dusky and in motion. It's just like the one off of just exactly like the one off of 100 Miles and Running, just without the intro type stuff towards it. It's just it maintains that kind of feel. It's this very leery kind of tune. Just another kind of city one. It kind of stands out in some ways, just in like the fact that it just sounds like dated compared to some of the stuff on this album. And kind of curious as to why they decided to keep this song on here, but it just continues that kind of cityscaping type feel of like the early 90s and 80s type feel straight out of Compton, 100 Miles and Running. Just it doesn't quite have as pounding production as some of the newer songs that they did, but it is a good highlight yet and still. I feel like I'd Rather Fuck You's a nice one. This is Eazy-E kind of with the scene stealing verse on here. He kind of switches like this kind of sample. I think it's like Bootsy Collins or something like that. Yeah, I'd Rather Be With You by Bootsy Collins. He kind of turns it into like a kind of he turns it into like a raunchy kind of tune. This is very campy. It's a parody song with like Chronic album kind of vibes. It just kind of feels more like a song of like a skit, but it's just kind of interesting kind of get that just because the Eazy-E album Easier Said Than, or the Eazy-E album Easy Does It was kind of joke filled as far as that kind of went. So this is some of Eazy's leftover humor from like the late 80s and that type stuff. This really has like Chronic album kind of vibes. This really feels like a California highlight. It's just kind of a 90s gangster rap highlight for especially for Eazy-E. This is a real nice one to kind of get Easy kind of doing like some early stages of like R&B type rap, kind of singing like Drake does and some of those type people, and Nelly and Flo Rida and some of them just being able to do it pretty well. He does a pretty good job with the rendition that he does. I mean, it's kind of sarcastic and campy of a song, but it just is kind of a pretty good highlight as far as that kind of goes. This is why Eazy-E needed to be on more songs. But a real good highlight on here that has all three rappers and Eazy-E not ducking the album is kind of Find 'em, Fuck 'em, Flee. This is a real nice one. Find 'em, Fuck 'em, Flee has a real slinky kind of beat and probably one of the best beats on the album. It's an early rendition of G-Funk and some of those type vibes. It's real kind of slinky and lazy summer day type tune. It's just pimpish kind of vibes about it with like a mellow guitar in there. It's just an overall highlight for the Chicas and that sort of concept. It's a really nice one to kind of get. This is one where the chemistry of all three N.W.A members just really kind of is like effortless on this song. This is definitely one that just needed more vibes like this. This is one that's a hit song, but it's not like missing such and such or so and so or something like that. It's just an overall highlight. One of the best songs in the album. This one's up there with Always Into Something in my opinion. She Swallowed It is a nice one. This has MC Ren only on here, but it's a rousing kind of house party bop. She Swallowed It is a rousing kind of house party bop. It's just a mid dance kind of cut. It's definitely the type of song that N.W.A needed. I mean, some complaints about this album is just the fact that they said that N.W.A was kind of misogynist in terms of some of the songs for ladies on here, but this is just a good example of one. If you're not heavily paying attention to the lyrics and the tone of like the song and that type of stuff, it is a pretty good dance cut to kind of get rowdy to in that sort of sense. This has some nice jive. It's probably another song that they needed more songs like this. I definitely would have liked another song like this with Eazy-E and Dr. Dre on there as well. It would have been a nice touch to kind of gotten some more of these. They should have probably scrapped like Automobile and put another song like She Swallowed It on here because this just has some nice jive. This is a real rousing kind of house party gem. This really is a highlight. Niggas for Life, the title track, is like a lurchy kind of evening city tune. This is one that kind of has like the same landscape as some of the tunes from Straight Outta Compton with this some of that city type feel. It's a traverse song, but it's more on foot and it just kind of has like a casual kind of feel. But it's just very lurchy and kind of paranoid in that sort of sense. It's a little bit kind of frenetic a bit. I like this kind of concept of advancing like the kind of cityscaping tunes that were on Straight Outta Compton. There's just not enough songs like this type song either. They don't do too many songs for cityscaping that much. But I do like the concept of getting this one. It's just kind of a lurchy kind of one, and it just kind of has like a more jittery aspect about it. But I do like the concept of just an advanced style of the ones that were off Straight Outta Compton. But it's just kind of the concept that, yeah, it's just a good one. All three of the members are on this song too, so this is a good one here. Kind of good sequel. So that takes care of it. So me liking 8.5 songs out of 13. I'm gonna go ahead and give this album like an 8.25 out of 10 because I think that that's pretty damn good. I liked all three of the singles, despite that my complaints about the patchiness of just like the member lineup is a little bit like that because Eazy-E switches out. Eazy-E kind of switches up and bails out on 2 out of 3 of the singles on here, so I'm kind of curious as to why that happened. It's really kind of somewhat of a disappointment just because it probably could have established. I know that N.W.A was kind of going through traction at the time. There was kind of bickering going on, and Dr. Dre was getting ready to leave and that type of stuff, and DOC was getting ready to leave. But I just look after it, just being able to say that the last singles that you get from N.W.A just really feel like more of like Dr. Dre songs with MC Ren on there more so than the actual group that they were in the late 80s and very early 90s. That's this kind of thing. It's really Dr. Dre that really stole the show on this album, I would have to say. He's the one that kind of turned this into like a prelude to the Chronic. Eazy was kind of just back and forth and kind of a lot more elusive than he should have been. And MC Ren was a good lyricist on here, but I kind of feel like the songs to showcase him just, I mean, he needed like a, I don't know. I mean, apart from She Swallowed It, there weren't huge songs that kind of separated him from like the crowd like Ice Cube did. I mean, Ice Cube got separated pretty quickly and kicked off on his own, but apart from She Swallowed It, MC Ren didn't really have that. I mean, he's a good group member, but just not in terms of like the solo affairs of saying that he could have been the next to have had an album like on Ruthless and that type of stuff, which he did do, but it's just they didn't go gold or platinum. So it's just kind of the thing. But to talk about the songs I didn't enjoy, like there's some kind of bad and clumsy beats on here. Like I really hated the beat on Automobile. That one was just kind of a sarcastic kind of like sing-songy kind of this like kids, almost like kids bop kind of tune in terms of the context of how it went. This was not, I mean, is this supposed to be kind of like a sarcastic kind of tune for getting the woman to go home with you and that type of stuff, but it just didn't really deliver that well. The singing was just bad on there. I also felt like Approach to Danger had a pretty bad beat on here. It just was trying to do horrorcore type vibes, and it's the same thing with Real Niggas Don't Die. Both Approach to Danger and Real Niggas Don't Die just did poor renditions of trying to do horrorcore. I mean, I think ultimately, eventually, I probably could have liked N.W.A doing some horrorcore type vibes, but the horrorcore beats that they delivered just were not quite good enough. They really, truly needed more beats like Always Into Something. That was the best example. That's the best beat on the album, the most classic California type tune. They needed way more songs like that, and they probably would have had a massive hit. It probably would have been another classic. I feel like most people probably feel like out of 5 stars that Niggas for Life is like a 4 out of 5 when Straight Outta Compton's a 5 out of 5. But it did have some good singles, but with not as much Eazy-E and not enough members to really facilitate like some more stuff on here. It just kind of felt like more of like a Dr. Dre prelude. But then also the song Prelude was just not that interesting. It's just kind of bland. Just didn't really deliver that much in terms of like a spark to kick off the album. So that's this kind of thing. 8.25. The social score I'm going to give like a 7 out of 10 because it did have some good songs on here. I feel like songs like She Swallowed It, Find 'Em, Fuck 'Em, and Flee, Always Into Something, and Appetite for Destruction all kind of have like some pretty hit party vibes. But this album just does not have. I mean, it needed more dance songs like She Swallowed It and Find 'Em, Fuck 'Em, Flea, and Eazy-E is not on enough of these songs. Dr. Dre kind of mostly steals the show. He's pretty much like the biggest star on this album, I would have to say, but there just aren't enough beats like the G Funk classic, Always Into Something. It just kind of, I feel like this album's just kind of more all over the place in terms of the topic variety this time, where I feel like there were just cityscaping tunes a lot on Straight Outta Compton and more kind of house party kind of vibes. It's just kind of patchy, just in the sense of this kind of being a lot more of a frenetic and kind of more schizophrenic kind of album that just is random and just has a lot more variety that just doesn't feel as amalgamated as far as that kind of goes. I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, there's just stuff on here, but a lot of them just don't have, it just doesn't have as much of a theme as much as in terms of the social score. It just doesn't quite have as much of like a layered theme as like Straight Outta Compton did, because you get like one house party song on here, you get like a saloon type going memories kind of song, you get a horrorcore type song, a party type song, and an appetite for destruction, a kind of California type song, and Always Into Something. One Less Bitch is kind of like a paranoid kind of ladies song. I'd Rather Fuck You's kind of a sarcastic kind of lady song, and Niggas for Life is kind of like a cityscaping tune like the old days. So it's just kind of all over the place in terms of like the angles that this album kind of has, and it's just kind of, or it has some good stuff, but it just feels very kind of like frenetic. That is kind of thing, but it is good. Ultimately, I like this album way more than I like Straight Outta Compton. It's just the singles were better, minus Always Into Something on Straight Outta Compton. They're just more revolutionary. It's just kind of the concept. It's just good to get both these albums. It's kind of the concept. I could talk about this for another 5, 10, 15 minutes, but it's just the impact, the kind of diciness of like the members being on here and not being on certain songs, and the approach that the topic themes are just more varietized, and that kind of concept is just kind of, it just feels, yeah, I have to keep saying this feels very frenetic. So it's this kind of thing, but it is good. I mean, don't pay attention. I gave it an 8.25 out of 10. So it is good stuff on here. It's quality. So that's kind of the thing. So in terms of the future, there really isn't one, just because like Eazy-E is deceased and the members are well in their 50s and that type of stuff. So it's just kind of things have moved on. Gangster rap has changed and that type of stuff. But this is a pretty good hit album. There's a lot of good moments on this project, and this is an overall good one to pick up. You just have to understand the kind of diciness just in terms of like the sporadic kind of feeling of it overall, but it is something still worth checking out. It's just, yeah.